Yeah.
Well, I feel like you really hit on like a bunch of stuff there, and I would love to get more into it, but I want to circle back to the meta part and then still get to that one last topic. So,
Sure.
um, in the very beginning, we were talking about cultural manipulation and maybe how that could be leading us to the metaverse or just a meta life. And you even said living in a 50 by 50 square foot apartment. Um, Alex brought up the Matrix, and I think that's like where you're in a little pod and you're basically a
Yeah.
battery. Um, it kind of involves machines and AI taking over, and I think that's a good example. But I also was thinking about Ready Player One, if you've seen
Yeah.
that movie. To me,
Great
that feels
movie,
like
by the
the
way.
first step. It's like
Hmm.
you can unplug and you can go and live in the real world, but if if you think about it, if we really do create a metaverse that you can sign on and off, and um, people have the freedom to do so, if it becomes so beneficial for someone to be in the online world, because maybe they don't like their body, like maybe they don't like the way they look.
Yep.
Um, I know that I'm very happy with the way I look, but I also love the way I looked when I was 17, and
Yep.
when I look in the mirror, sometimes that mental image of myself is like I have hair, and I'm like, oh, I don't anymore, and that's okay. But
Yeah.
like, I just sometimes see myself as like I used to have I liked my hair, and
Hmm.
even just getting older.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm pretty lucky. Like I have full function of my body. I can run.
Yeah.
I can lift weights. I can lift up my daughters. I can go on a long hike. But some people might get to, or are currently at a stage where they were born with something that is a defect and they're just like kind of behind the eight ball right from the start, but could live a very
Hmm.
good life virtually. Some people
Hmm.
haven't taken good care of themselves. And I feel like the virtual world would be like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or it would kind of be like a situation where you would just naturally take worse care of yourself because you'd spend all
Oh,
this time
totally.
online, so your
Yep.
body would like be getting worse even if it was good.
Yep.
So I feel like what happens in Ready Player One is almost the real world becomes just kind of shit because like who
Oh,
wants to
totally.
be in that world? So it's just
Yep.
trash everywhere, and everybody that you'd want to go talk to is plugged in. It's not like this happens on day one. It's like we're talking about if in 2050, like 2040,
Hmm.
maybe it's like, okay, this is like now we can all plug in. And then by 2050, it's like there's some pretty cool enhancements. And then by like
Hmm.
2060, you start to notice that you don't see as many people out at all. Like you're always and sometimes you're like, businesses are closing down because there's not even really workers.
No,
People
totally. I
are
mean,
making money
seeing that
online.
now. Yep.
Like people can, I think you can create properties that people could buy online, and all
Yes.
of a sudden people
For
just
like
start,
ridiculous amounts of actual money, by the way,
yeah.
like millions of dollars for
And
virtual property.
there's so many things that you can do to make money now that are new. Like,
Yeah.
and young people, I mean, let's say you're 15 or younger, are going to grow up learning how to do that kind of stuff, and it's all online. I really do think like a Godfather's Pizza in a strip mall closed like a year ago, and it's totally vacant. And I always drive by it on my way whenever I'm kind of coming from that direction,
Hmm.
and I think that's just such an ugly little tiny strip mall and it's not in a good location. I just have a hard time thinking anyone's ever going to rent that. But some business owner owns that space, so it's probably a financial burden on the business owner because no one's rented
Hmm.
it out for a year. And
Yeah.
I know that COVID kind of sparked a lot of that, but I just think, like you said, if we continue to move in a way, it's going to cause huge ripple effects that I think are kind of very much negative. I mean, there's a really cool
I
part
agree.
about plugging in and
Totally,
looking
dude.
like I want to look, maybe even
Yeah.
living forever as like another part of it. But there's a lot of negative consequences that come with
Yep.
it, and they're kind of inevitable. You just
Oh,
can't.
they absolutely are. Well, and it's a for me, it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario, is so what would drive somebody to engage in the metaverse? Well, could be despair, lack of financial freedom, perhaps, as you pointed out, you have some bodily dysfunction or something like that. I mean, who knows? Maybe you just have a pure enjoyment for it. But then what comes after is, like you pointed out, maybe your health gets worse. Maybe, um, it leads to more despair in the real world. Um, and so it all is, to me, it's just kind of a big circle. It's like how do you want to say? I mean, the same cause has the effect, or the effect has the cause. I mean, it all kind of revolves on itself. But there's kind of a lot to unpack with what you said there, because I think the real world implications of this are, yeah, I don't think there's anything long term positive that comes from it. I think what you're going to see is, again, what you're kind of seeing now, which is the haves versus the have nots. And I think a lot of the have nots, their lives will be lived in something like that, because their quality of life outside is going to be terrible, for whatever reason. I mean, you might you might step into the metaverse and be, some great powerful warlord, and then once you unplug, you live in, you know, a house the size of my living room, and you know, you have like one chair and three items in your fridge. I mean, that's the reality, and frankly, that's probably the result, because look at how infatuated people get with video games. I'm guilty of it, man. If a game comes out, I've been known to put a lot of hard-earned time into that thing, So
Time
imagine
can
if
just fly by.
yeah. Now imagine if you have, like in Ready Player One, you have a suit on to where you can feel your environment like you're actually there. You see it like you're actually there. You can look at your hand right in front of your face like you're really there. Why would you leave? But then you, there again, you're lacking this human component. So when you talk about maybe somebody who has a handicap for some reason, and they're in their mind, their best quality of life is in the metaverse. So in reality, if it didn't exist, they might have some close personal relationships that are far more fulfilling in the long term. Because guess what? When you're 90 years old on your deathbed, what's the metaverse going to do for you? Are you going to have anybody there holding your hand? And you lose those things if you're not living in the real world. So I think there could be a lot of fun with the metaverse. I personally would probably like to try it if it ever comes to that. But I think it's really important to understand that that's not a that's not where life begins or ends. Um, Components of it can exist there, but that's it. I read stories of a couple who got married in the metaverse, and I just think to myself, man, that's a pretty precious moment in your life, and were your loved ones
Does it
there?
already exist today? Like could I go
Oh
in the
yeah,
metaverse?
yeah. You can work in the metaverse. I mean, people have had jobs in the
I
metaverse
thought it was all
already.
like conceptual. So like how do you
I
get
mean,
in? How do you
I
get to it?
honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I've not even looked into it. I just know that it does exist in a state. Now, is it in the state of what we would aspire it to be down the road? No. I mean, it's very, I mean, imagine you took like I don't know, like a Nintendo 64 and made a metaverse out of it. That's kind of what it looks like, at least from the pictures and, little things I've seen on it. I mean, it's not super awesome in terms of graphics and stuff like that. I think it's probably dependent on what you're experiencing within. I'm sure there's areas where it's pretty amazing with what's going on, but it's very rudimentary at this point. So to your point earlier, maybe 2040, look at what video games did in 20 years now. Multiply that by 10 going into the next 20. I mean, who knows what that's going to look like? But yeah,
And
again,
this
I think it's. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, I just think it seems to me, like I said in the beginning, that there's somewhat of an agenda. I mean, you just look at the despair being created around the world, to where maybe, and I'm not saying this is like the end goal with all that stuff, but it could be a convenient one. Um, but it seems like there could be some things in play right now that would drive people to go into that more, or further um, enhance, if you want to call it that, their virtual life. We do, as we talked about earlier, we do so much through our phones and our computers the way it is. That's only going to multiply. I mean, how long is it going to be before that stuff is part of your body? I mean, I think I've already seen stuff where you can have a
Yeah.
phone integrated into your hand, or like a chip of some sort to scan things. That stuff to me is, I mean, I'm a Christian. That stuff to me, like when I think of the Antichrist, that's it. I mean, I want no part of that. So, and you made the point earlier of, well, you could live forever in the metaverse. I think there is an agenda that that's what they want. They want to be able to exist indefinitely. But the thing I don't think they're accounting for is your soul, who you are, and
Right.
that does not translate over into a computer, no matter what. Maybe your brain can, maybe your brain waves. Sure, I'll give them that. That'll probably happen at some day, but otherwise, no. And on that note, I actually heard something last week that, oh gosh, what was it? Jared Kushner, of all people, which he's a character I don't really appreciate either. Um, but he made a statement of he thinks our generation, because he's like our age,
Okay.
will be the last generation to die. Is a statement he made. Well, and then you ask yourself, well, how do they do that? Well, there's a couple of ways. You could do that medically. If you can somehow find a way to reverse aging, which I think pivoting back to the vaccines, perhaps mRNA technology is something that they would utilize to accomplish such a thing. But the other option would be through technology, um, you know, digital technology, we'll say. So when you hear things like that coming from, let's face it, one of the more powerful people, in America, if not the world, it kind of, I don't know, lends some validity to what that agenda is or what I just suggested. So